Good evening, my name is Dante and welcome back to my channel. On this channel I discuss some of my favorite topics such as dark and heavy music, horror movies, true crime, and various creepy media I find on the internet. Before we start tonight, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Wyatt X Him for shouting me out in one of his recent videos. I really enjoy his channel and was so honored to see so many of you check me out off of his recommendation. I hope you all stick around and we can talk about some spooky shit together. This is going to be the first horror movie related video that I do, as well as the beginning of a new series. From the time I was a kid, I fell madly in love with the slasher movie craze of the 1980s. Having discovered the Halloween franchise at age 10, I found myself delving more and more into the niche throughout my teenage years. A website I would frequent known as Hysteria-Lives was a goldmine of reviews for strange, obscure films within the slasher genre. To this day, I still regularly check out their page to see what new movies they've covered. With this, I decided I would do my own 80s slasher iceberg. For those who aren't familiar, iceberg videos are where you take a bunch of examples of a specific topic, then you rank it based off of its accessibility or obscurity, with the top of the iceberg being the most commonly known stuff and the bottom of the iceberg being the most obscure. This video will be part 1 or tier 1 of 4, and because there are so many movies to choose from, I'll be narrowing it down to only 5 movies per video. I know this means that I will be leaving a lot of shit out. If the demand and interest for me to cover this topic more comes up, I'll continue making horror related videos. For now though, we'll just test these first 4 videos out and see what happens. Lastly, I'm going to skip over all of the major franchises such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street and focus specifically on stuff that's a little bit lesser known. If you all would like for me to make a video discussing those films, leave a comment to let me know. Anyhow, without further ado, let's kick off tier 1. Much of this may still be stuff you all know, but this is a good start for people wanting to dip their toes in this niche of cinema. The first movie I'll be discussing is The Burning from 1981. This is a pretty well-known slasher that I feel a lot of people will recognize. Its concept is pretty similar to that of Friday the 13th. A creepy old camp counselor named Cropsy ends up badly burned after a prank gone wrong. Years later, he returns to the camp with a giant pair of head shears in hand to exact revenge on various young counselors. The Burning is most well known for a famous scene in which 4 teenagers are brutally murdered on a raft by Cropsy in broad daylight. The image of Cropsy rising out of the water with the head shears as he is attacking them is pretty iconic within both the slasher genre and horror cinema as a whole. One unique factor about the film would be how most of the action occurs during the day, with much of the movie's climax occurring in the afternoon as opposed to at night. The movie is also unique in its lack of the archetypal final girl role. Instead, we have a group of survivors with 2 lead male characters facing off with the villain. Some of the pacing in the first half of the film is a little slow, as a lot of filler dialogue and camaraderie between campers take up time before we start to get to the scary sequences. However, the second half stays intense without letting up, and the final confrontation with Cropsy is legitimately unsettling. Obviously, with it being a camp slasher released around the same time as Friday the 13th, it didn't quite get the same following as the major franchise. However, it's still well made and has some decent scares. Plus, the amazing special effects work from Tom Savini definitely never hurts. Also a fun side note, but a young Jason Alexander, who would later become known as George Costanza on the show Seinfeld, would also play one of the camp counselors in this movie. Next, I'm going to talk about My Bloody Valentine. No, not the shoegaze band, but the movie that band was named after. My Bloody Valentine was released in 1981 from Paramount Pictures. The movie takes place in a small mining town called Valentine Bluffs in Canada. 20 years prior to the events of the story, a horrible chain of events involving the death of several miners led to the town suspending their annual Valentine's Day dance. Skip to what would be present day in the film, and the mayor has decided to lift that ban and let the young townsfolk have their dance, while someone cloaked in miner gear and wielding a pickaxe begins murdering people around town in the days leading up to the dance, as well as sending threats to the police to cancel the dance. One thing leads to another, and a group of young partygoers have the brilliant idea to go into the mine the night of the dance, only to end up trapped down there with the mysterious miner. The miner picks off the characters one by one in the dark tunnels of the mines, leading to a full-on cart chase between the killer and the protagonists. What I enjoy about My Bloody Valentine is its cozy depiction of a small working-class town. The overall setting and atmosphere remind me a lot of Twin Peaks, with its hazy cinematography and friendly, likable protagonists. Likewise, the movie succeeds in its ability to create suspense quietly and subtly, without booming scores or jump scares to signify when something scary is happening. It's a very atmospheric and sleepy movie that I feel has held up pretty well over time, especially in comparison to the more comical and cartoonish remake from 2009. A movie that I feel pairs considerably well with My Bloody Valentine is The Prowler, also known as Rosemary's Killer, released in 1981. As you can tell, 81 was a very strong year for this specific niche of horror. Anyway, The Prowler takes on sort of a similar premise as My Bloody Valentine. The beginning of the movie takes place during World War II. A veteran returning from the war finds out his girlfriend has left him for someone else. The night of the town's graduation dance, the veteran murders his ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend. 35 years later, the college decides to hold the graduation dance for the first time since those murders, and someone clad in an army combat uniform begins murdering students with a bayonet and pitchfork the night of the dance. This movie slaps. It's intense, it's violent. Tom Savini does the special effects, so the death scenes are very well done, and I love the climax of this movie. There is a lengthy cat and mouse chase throughout an old house between the protagonist Pam and the killer, who brandishes a sawed-off shotgun at her. She holds her own and puts up a good fight, which I always love seeing in a final girl. It's a genuinely scary face-off that leads to an amazing ending that gives a strong nod to the original Carrie from 1976. Overall, I feel like this is a slasher movie that is perhaps better known, but doesn't quite get the praise that I feel it deserves. Terror Train is one of my favorite slasher movies of all time. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I've always loved her, and I will always enjoy any horror movie where she plays the protagonist. Between the Halloween movies, Prom Night, The Fog, and Terror Train, she slayed as a final girl. Although Prom Night could have also placed on this particular list, I instead chose Terror Train specifically because I've always found Terror Train to be a much more effective and unsettling film. This one came out in 1980 and starts with a college prank gone horribly wrong at the expense of an awkward med student named Kenny, leading him to being committed to an institution. 3 years later, the students who were involved in the prank are celebrating New Year's Eve by having a costume party on a train. Well, Kenny manages to sneak on and begins discreetly killing off the students one by one, changing into their costumes after each murder to disguise himself as he wanders through the train cars. The movie does a great job of creating tension and dread in its claustrophobic setting. Everything that happens throughout the movie occurs in extremely close quarters. With the killer creeping around the characters completely unnoticed, there is a great deal of discomfort in knowing that at no point are any of the characters safe. This movie also has an incredibly intense cat and mouse chase between Jamie Lee Curtis's character and the killer, as he pursues her throughout various train cars with an axe, and she resorts to locking herself in a cage-like office while her attacker taunts her from outside the cage. One fun fact about the movie is that real-life magician David Copperfield co-stars and performs actual magic tricks in a few scenes. This would be his one and only acting role in a film. Overall, I've always found this to be a genuinely frightening film. It's very much worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of Jamie Lee Curtis as I am. The last film in Tier 1 is Happy Birthday to Me, and holy shit, there is so much to say about this one. In short, the movie follows Jenny, a newcomer to a super elite popular clique at a swanky prestigious college. Someone begins killing Jenny's friends off in weird creative ways. All the while, we start to find out that Jenny has some strange, dark secrets that may or may not have something to do with why the murders are occurring. First of all, the death scenes in this film are just straight up bizarre. We have death by shish kebab, death by scarf and motorcycle gears, death by barbell. There were a lot of creative risks taken here that you don't always see in a lot of these films. One fun fact about the movie is that apparently the writers couldn't settle on an ending, and it was rewritten several times throughout production before the final ending was shot. This led to the movie itself feeling very disorienting and confusing, and while this could be seen as a flaw to many, it actually ends up playing pretty well into the arc of its protagonist. Much of the story has to do with Jenny's mental state and her constantly questioning what's happening around her. There are a lot of sudden shifts in the plot that create a surreal, almost David Lynch type of storytelling that I feel is effective for what the movie was trying to do. Plus, we are treated to an almost comical Scooby-Doo style reveal that left me going, wait, what? Which I have to appreciate. Overall, it's a fun and creative movie with a ton of twists that keep it from feeling predictable or formulaic. So that wraps up tier 1 for some of my favorite 80s slasher movies. Do you know these movies? Do you like these movies? What are your thoughts on them? Again, there are so many films in this genre worth talking about. If you feel that I left something out, please let me know in the comments and I might cover it in a later video. Tier 2 is going to be slightly more obscure and a little more weird, so be on the lookout for that. Be sure to check out Hysteria-Lives and their amazing library of reviews, interviews, and retrospectives of these various slasher classics. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to support my content, I am also active on Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit, so you can follow me there as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. Stupid fucking phone? What the f?